So today, the average American believes that guns have just been like this super important, integral part of American history, when that may not necessarily be accurate. We can look back at, historically, whenever there were really major health risks involving guns, our country did not hesitate to pass legislation to deal with it. When John F. Kennedy was assassinated, we passed legislation to prevent people from buying guns through the mail. Most famously in this country's history was actually Ronald Reagan. And then when he was elected president, just a month or so into his inauguration, there was an assassination attempt on his life. And so Reagan became the biggest proponent for the Brady handgun bill, which is still in use today. I think it has to do with lobbying groups, to be honest, right? You have groups like the NRA that pushes this narrative that we need guns to protect ourselves from our tyrannical government. Based on this mythology that America earned its independence because a bunch of shopkeepers grabbed guns from behind their countertops and they defeated the strongest army in the world. And that's not really what happened. But that mythology was built in the 1800s by Samuel Colt and later by Oliver Winchester. So famously the Colt Gun Company and the Winchester Gun Company. At the time, there was this thing called the dime store novel. Like you could go into any general store and you'd find these little 10, 20 page little handbooks that they would sell for a dime. And Colt saw how well they were selling. So he invited people to write stories about people using his guns. And he was famously quoted as saying, "I don't care if the character has a name or not, but I want you to name my guns." Think about public health. What we're looking at is really, there's this line that we walk where we're looking for society's good or the individual benefit, right? And so like my research kind of focuses on that individual benefit aspect, which is in health and well-being. When we look at guns and public health, the data is very clear that guns are not good for you, right? That you're at increased risk of suicide, you're at increased risk of hurting yourself or your family members. So my research then looks at that individual benefit, because in public health, if there is an individual benefit, then we can't ethically push for restrictions that would hurt that benefit, right? So I've looked at things like, are gun owners more or less afraid than non-gun owners? We've started finding is that there isn't any transferable individual benefit. So there's no reason ethically that we can't pursue, legislation to protect the broader public. Republican Congress in '96 passed an amendment to our basically our spending budget called the Dickey Amendment. They basically made it illegal for the CDC to fund research on guns. Even today in America, we have to argue very basic associations like gun laws work. And I can show you the CDC's data every year since 2005, but because we don't fully fund research into that, we're having to constantly make those same claims every year. Because we have, this culture and this myth that we're built with guns, then you have a lobbying group that has aligned itself politically with a party and gives a lot of money to that party. If you're being lobbied, it's not in your interest, if you want to keep that funds coming in, to go against the people that are paying you, even though the American people greatly agree on certain things. So for instance, about 88% of Democrats and 87% of Republicans believe if you're on the terrorist no-fly list in this country, you should not have a gun. Congress won't pass that bill because the NRA lobbies against it. And when you think about, like, in certain areas of this country, guns are, a useful tool. So, where I'm at in Florida, the surrounding states near us, are a lot of farmers and rural people. So they use guns to keep pests off their yards. And so they also have a big hunting culture. It may not seem like it, but the majority of Americans are in favor of gun control. But we have a very vocal minority that kind of is heard over those more reasonable, moderate voices.